Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ny Whitaker, and I'm the founder and chief strategist of Project NYNE. I'm an entrepreneur, a social impact consultant, an NYU professor, and a proud Obama alumni. And I believe that there is magic in our mistakes. So let's talk about it for a minute. I have a confession to make. I used to believe that people got to be successful, by whatever definition you define success, by living a life without making any errors or any mistakes. And that almost cost me my opportunities in life. So let's talk about it. I'm going to take you courtside for my favorite team, the New York Knicks. Of course, we had to have a Knicks moment while we were here. And I was really thinking about this amazing championship series that they had, and that there was one play that I could not get out of my mind. Now, there's NY in my name, there's NY in their names, so as far as I'm concerned, all the Knicks are my cousins. But I say that because while everybody was in the hype and they were able to show so much heart that united not only a city but the world, I kept thinking about this one play at the end of Game 4, when my favorite Knick, Josh Hart, missed a $1 million layup. He missed a shot that NBA players can make in their sleep. And I remember distinctly when he missed that shot, he made a mistake while millions of fans were screaming in the stands, and even thousands more were watching on TV and via streaming. And analysts started talking about it on every news station. And in that moment, I saw Josh Hart fall to the floor and shame wash over him. And it looked like he wasn't going to get back up and get back in the game. But then his teammates rushed over to him, and they all reached out a hand, and they helped him up. And in that moment, it was obvious that they were not going to let that mistake ruin their chance, that there was going to be magic in that moment, that it wasn't the end of the game or the series, but the beginning. And that night, in Game 4, willed them back into what came to be Knicks in 5. I say that because sometimes we are that person. How many of us are still seated on the floor with our hands covering our face because we missed a layup or made a mistake 5, 10, 20 years ago? How many of us were taught that when we made a mistake, we were shamed? We weren't allowed to sit in the moment and learn from it. Sometimes that shame came from our parents or our families, because oftentimes our parents thought that if you made a mistake, it reflected poorly on them, that they had somehow failed. Failed you, failed at being a parent, failed at their community. They were concerned about what the elders would say, or their neighbors would say, or what your teachers would say. I remember my parents being concerned about how we showed up in the supermarket, as my parents would remind me to put that box of Cocoa Puffs back on the shelf before they gave me something to cry about. We all know what that was like. That shame wasn't something that we invented. We inherited it. And that shame often presents a challenge for us. It prevents us from sitting in the moment and learning a lesson. I think as a parent about how many times I've been in the playground, and I always say there's two teams of parents. When a kid is on the slide and they come swishing down, there's always that moment when they're kind of like propelled off. And one set of parents screams, yells, runs to the kid and grabs it, and usually scares the child, who starts to scream and freezes because they don't know what's coming next. And there's usually that other set of parents who waits a moment to see the kid and what they're about to do. The kid usually frowns, gets back up, and runs and gets on the slide again. So in those two scenarios, you can see one in which the child is really mimicking what their parents are seeing and becomes concerned, and one where the child is taught to kind of look inside, to sit with the moment and shift. I say that because one of the hardest challenges we have is as parents. Tomorrow's Father's Day. I would say motherhood for me. Let's say parenting for everyone else. But as parents, we often are caught in these moments where we have to see our children go through the lessons that come from making mistakes. I have to tell you, being a parent was the biggest challenge for me. You will go through being a parent thinking every decision you make is the greatest mistake, because every second of every minute of every hour of every day, you think you're getting something wrong. And then one day, your small child is an adult, and they are faced with a challenge. And you have to decide, do I jump in and save them, or do I let them navigate this moment? But sometimes that mistake is very grave, and you've got to think about what will happen if I intervene? What's on the other side of this? And sometimes when you let your kids go through it, they come out on the other side braver, bolder, and more courageous than you ever thought. And that mistake, that moment that you thought was going to wound and scar them for life, ends up giving them an opportunity to blossom. I also like to think of this in really small ways, like when you're in the kitchen. Anybody cooks here? We're in the culinary capital of the world here in Harlem. And I have this cabinet right above my stove that has every seasoning you can think of for every culinary concoction. But sometimes I'm distracted, and I might grab the wrong seasoning to add to my pot. And sometimes you might ruin the meal. Sometimes you might invent something new. And I would like to think that many of the recipes that we hold sacred in our families were really one accident away from being something that was not edible. But someone was brave enough to try it and add a little salt and add a little spice and make it better. But sometimes there are those nights where you've got a burned pot on the stove and you just give up. You make a mistake, and what happens? You might be with friends and order pizza, open a bottle of wine, and have a fun night. You might, in my house, say, we're going out for Chinese. And when you do, there's magic in that moment. That mistake that you made at the dining room table turns into an evening of fun and magic. The mistake made the moment. The recipe wasn't the point, but the gathering was. There's magic in the mistakes that we make that we can learn from each and every day. I think about even in science. Science is about exact measurements and principles. But sometimes the greatest revelations have come from that Petri dish that got contaminated, or from an experiment that didn't work out the way it was intended to, that leads through a groundbreaking new science. I mean, we just had a pandemic where all of the new technologies came from people making mistakes. We've got to be open to the possibility that there's magic in our mistakes and be willing to sit in those moments. I also want to say that part of the ability to do so is to have the right team with you, to have the people that will run to you in those moments of mistakes and help pick you up off the floor, and to convince you that there's another play in the game to be made. I ask and encourage each of you to be that person, not only for yourself, but for someone else here in the room or someone in your life. There's magic in our mistakes, and it's important that we allow ourselves a moment to be in the messy middle and to learn that there isn't shame in making a mistake. There's only a shame in not living. Thank you all. I'm Ny Whitaker.